What's up, everybody? Welcome into a brand new edition of the 365 Sports Newsletter, the Baylor Bears edition. I am Craig Smoak with you each week. Here's a part of the Big 12 newsletter that we have for you, dropping each and every Wednesday through Rogue Media and 365 Sports. If you're seeing this, well, you're maybe on YouTube and just catching it on the channel. And if you are, then please hit that like and subscribe button. But if not, catching it in passing, or maybe you've heard about our newsletter and you don't know where to go to sign up for it, 365sports.video. 365sports.video is where you can go check out the Big 12 newsletter that drops every Wednesday mid-morning. It's got a video and article on all 16 teams in the league to keep you up to date each week as we get into another college football weekend. And I am doing the honors for Baylor week in and week out. So again, any support we would appreciate. 365sports.video. Spread the word, sign up, get others signed up, and get a newsletter in your inbox each and every Wednesday, talking Baylor, Arizona State, everything and all things Big 12. So when it comes to the Bears in particular, fresh off of their first bye week, sitting at 4-2, and depending on when you've checked in on Baylor, you might think that they were 2-4 or even 1-5 after a couple of these losses. But really, overall, I think the vibes are pretty good. They are not the most talked about or the most exciting team in the world, even though they're still in the conversation when it comes to the Big 12, very much in the conversation of just 2-1 in the Big 12, only a game behind the leaders in the pack. But also an exciting team at times, particularly when this offense is humming and rolling along. But I think with just the toughness of the schedule, taking a couple losses in the first half of the season and just playing 6 consecutive games, it was nice timing for the Bears to get their first breather. And then you look back on the Big 12 weekend that was, and it was great timing to get your first breather of the year. The Bears get to sit back and watch the chaos around the rest of the league kind of open things up for them or keep things very much within reach for them. Now, Texas Tech still out above them. BYU still out above them. But they're right there with Utah at this point, right there with Arizona State, who takes their first loss. You're above Iowa State at this point in the standings. You're above Colorado and UCF. You're looking up at Cincinnati, but you're right there with Houston. And you're actually a game up on your opponent, TCU, and a couple games up on Kansas State at this point in the standings. And I could go on and on, but the point is that when you look at where Baylor is compared to the rest of the league, they're in that upper half. They're just a game behind, like I said, that lead pack of Texas Tech and also BYU and Cincinnati, who are all 3-0. But beyond that, the Bears at 2-1 are sitting there with just a couple of other teams like Arizona State and Houston at this point. So you wouldn't necessarily think that they were in such good position, just based kind of on vibes sometimes, but everything is still there for the taking despite a couple of losses. And I'm very curious to see how this team plays after a week off. I mean, when we last saw them, it was a struggle and yet another comeback bid that got them a big win over Kansas State. And then Kansas State paying them off in kind with the nice win over upcoming opponent TCU, getting them a win over their upcoming opponent. And just always good to see TCU lose if you're a Baylor person, right? But also coming in with some momentum in this game. So not a team that you're going to sleep on in general, but certainly not after what they just did in Manhattan this past weekend against the Horned Frogs. So Kansas State 41-28 over TCU is now what you've got in front of you. And you've had a couple weeks to prepare for this game. Obviously, you've been studying Kansas State. It's been a very up and down year for them, but you got that big win. And now you look at TCU and it's not all that dissimilar. It's been a very up and down year for the Horned Frogs as well. Josh Hoover's very good, but he can still be prone to turnovers. You saw a couple of big picks in that game last week. Still threw for nearly 403 TDs, but not his sharpest game by any stretch. TCU can't run the football effectively really at all, but they can sling it around, which doesn't necessarily bode well against a Baylor defense who has a bit of a shaky secondary. But the run game, something that you can control and you can handle. If you can keep the passing game within reason, then you should be okay. And then offensively, well, Kansas State just dropped 41 on TCU's head, and their defense, really nothing to write home about. Gave up 35 to Colorado the week prior, gave up 27 to Arizona in a loss, gave up 24 to SMU. Hell, even gave up 14 to lowly North Carolina at the beginning of the season and 21 to Abilene Christian. Point being, TCU will give up some points, and here in their last 3 Big 12 games, they've certainly done that. So I think Baylor can score on this TCU team if they play a clean game, and very interested to see Sawyer Robertson on the other side of a bye week. Is he feeling good? Kind of what's the attitude when it comes to the run game, since that's been such a very hot topic? How's Bryson Washington feeling? Just where are they on the other side of health? I'm very intrigued to know that. But if they're close to or at 100%, there's no reason to believe that Baylor cannot score on this TCU defense. And if you're TCU, you're sitting there looking, saying there's no reason we can't score in this Baylor offense. So point being, I'm expecting another Big 12 shootout. And with the way that Baylor is constructed, I think that's going to be basically every game the rest of the way, but particularly in a matchup like this one with TCU, where I think you're very much looking in the mirror at a team that's got a really good NFL quality quarterback, whether that's as a starter or just a guy who hangs around the league for a little while. At a minimum, Josh Hoover and Sawyer Robertson are going to hang around and maybe play a lot more than that. But you've got two pretty good quarterbacks. I think Baylor has the advantage as far as a running game goes, even though they've had ebbs and flows as far as establishing them. They've had ebbs and flows as far as establishing that for themselves at times. I think you're splitting hairs a little bit in the passing game. Maybe give a nod to TCU, but if you are, it's by a smidgen. You really have to worry about Eric McAllister. That's the big concern. He and Hoover, just a dynamic duo along the lines of Tyson and Levitt out in Tempe before Levitt's injury. One of the better combinations in the entire country. Definitely a test for this Baylor secondary. And they've got other guys as well, but that is their most high-profile matchup. So I think you're kind of looking in the mirror as far as that goes. And then a defense that's been a bit of a sieve, or not physical enough, or just not good enough at times. And I think you also relate to that if you're a Baylor fan. I think they can run on TCU. I think they can throw on TCU. I think TCU can throw on them. We'll see as far as the running game goes, because really it's less about Baylor's defense and more about just TCU's ineffectiveness to really do that this year. But this is a game that, despite what either team has looked like, is very much a rivalry and very much one where you can throw the records out. But the records are interesting here because these two teams find themselves, again, kind of looking in the mirror. Only one game difference. They're both 4-2, but the game up, the 2-1 record versus the 1-2 record that Baylor has versus TCU, the only thing separating these teams as we roll into Saturday. An 11 a.m. kickoff there at Amon Carter Stadium in Fort Worth. Home field, slight advantage to TCU, but I'm not expecting anything so overwhelming as to Baylor having to feel like they're walking into any more of a hornet's nest than they normally would be walking into in Fort Worth, or for a matchup of this caliber. So I don't expect that to play too heavy of a factor. I'm torn on the outcome here. I think they're very even teams, as I continue to point out. I don't think much separates them. And home field, if anything, is a slight advantage. And as we've seen in this rivalry, you can kind of throw home field out sometimes as well. Plenty of TCU victories in Waco, plenty of Baylor victories in Fort Worth, not by the dozens or even by the handfuls, but we've seen both go and win at each other's respective places here in recent memory. So that's not some hurdle too far to be crossed or too high to be jumped. So 2 weeks to prepare. Strengths that go well against their weaknesses. They have strengths that go well against your weaknesses. Call all things equal. Who wants to win this football game? I think it's a coin flip football game. And that's typically what this rivalry sort of has been, more so on the TCU side over the last decade than on the Baylor side. But often enough for the Bears that it's not as ugly as it got there post Bryles for a while, when TCU was really building this long win streak in the wake of just Baylor's kind of downturn there. The Bears have bounced back a little bit. And so, I feel like this is your typical TCU Baylor game where you want to know the winner, flip a coin. Do you call heads? You say it's going to be TCU? Well, then TCU is going to win this football game, and so on. And I flipped the coin, and the coin landed on TCU. So I will go with that for my official pick this week. But the reason I'm not getting more detailed than that, because I don't think there's really any more to really dive into as far as this game goes. I mean, we can get into specific individual matchups, but it's Baylor TCU. I mean, it's kind of going to be unpredictable. And what we do know about these teams, again, goes back to them being pretty equal, all things considered. But big time quarterback matchup in this one. Great opportunity for the Baylor run game to get going against TCU, and for the Baylor defense to kind of bow up its neck and make sure that TCU stays as one-dimensional as possible. But both defenses have their work cut out for them when it comes to defending these passing games, whether it's Robertson to Cameron or Trigg or any other number of weapons that he has at his disposal, or it's Hoover going to his guy, Eric McAllister, among others. This should be a game with some scoring, with some fireworks, and yes, very much a Big 12 shootout style of game is what I am anticipating. So it's a wide open league race at this point in time. We're going to get some more activity when you've got Tech and Arizona State creating some more separation, the Holy War this weekend as well. So the winner of this game, particularly if it's Baylor, if they can somehow move to 3-1 in the Big 12, would be sitting supremely nice in the conference race just as we cross over the midway point, and not trying to get too far ahead. But you'd be rolling into Cincinnati feeling great about where you sit with a couple of supremely difficult games still to come. Got to go to Cincinnati, got to go to Utah. And then you've got 3 home games as well in a Big 12 coin flip type league. You never know against an Arizona or a Houston or even a UCF for that matter. But this is the type of game where if TCU wins this, then I think they feel good. Their playoff talk is very much off the table, as is Baylor's. But if you're TCU, you still got a couple losses, so you've got a little bit of a weight around your neck, but you're back in the game. If you lose this game and all of a sudden you're sitting there with 3 conference losses, it's very much out of your control. For Baylor, same thing. You're very much still in control for the most part. You just keep doing your thing. You're going to be fine. You lose this game, though, well, all of a sudden now you're kind of in a muddled middle of the Big 12 and not nearly as much in control. So this is a supremely important game for both sides. And again, if it's Baylor that emerges victorious in Fort Worth, not only would it be a huge rivalry win and a great feel-good win and a 5-2 record and a 3-1 start, or a 3-1 start in the Big 12, but it would be a game that very much puts you back in that conversation you were in at the beginning of the year as a Big 12 contender. But you got to go do it. We've seen really good Baylor teams play TCU teams that you expected them to beat, only for them to fall short in every type of way. Blowout, walk-off field goal, and that cuts both ways as well. So who knows really what to expect other than probably another classic back-and-forth tug-of-war style game. I think anything beyond a shootout back-and-forth style game, or one that's just back and forth but maybe a little bit more low-scoring than expected, anything outside of that, like a blowout either way, I think would be the surprising result. But, yeah, I expect a hell of a game. I expect a heated rivalry. As always when these two teams meet. And as of right now, I expect TCU by the slightest of margins as the home field team to have an advantage and to get the win. But I love Baylor's chances if they play their game to roll into Fort Worth and get a big win, and a win that we would be talking about in multiple different ways next week on this podcast, because it would mean that, again, they are sitting nice and pretty. It's a matchup you like. It's a matchup that but again, does cut both ways. But I'm very much looking forward to this one. Baylor Bears back in action this Saturday against TCU. Can't wait to see the result and talk about it with you next week. Before you go, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you want to talk Baylor football with us a couple of times a week or be a part of our 365 Sports newsletter, go to 365sports.video and sign up there. Encourage others to do so as well. I write an article each week and cut this video as a part of our coverage of Baylor and all 16 of the Big 12 schools. So Bears, Horned Frogs this Saturday, 11 a.m. in Fort Worth. Cannot wait, and we'll be talking all about it the next time we see you again here on the 365 Sports Newsletter, Baylor Edition. I'm Craig Smoak.